Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to Judy and David Marwick for sponsoring this morning's learning in honor of Stuart and Judy Rosenthal, guests of honor at the Shoals recent banquet. Certainly very apropos. And thank you very much, Mrs. Marwick. Thank you. Okay. Chapter 28, verse 30. We're still on the Ramban. If you remember, we were talking yesterday about the Urim V'Tumim. And what I think people found interesting to think about is it was clear from the Ramban that whether it be that God put together the Urim V'Tumim from Moshe, God told Moshe how to do the Urim V'Tumim, seemed to be very privileged knowledge for Moshe Rabbeinu to know how the Urim V'Tumim was made and how it was utilized. And so if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Lamed, in mine it's the last paragraph beginning with the word Ve'efshar. It's about 10 lines from the bottom of the Ramban. Just some people were asking yesterday about sort of to what extent Moshe shared this with others. So the Ramban goes on and he says, Ve'efshar, Shachri Nasan Moshe B'choshen, Hashemos HaKadoshim Shel Urim V'Tumim. It could be that after Moshe Rabbeinu placed in the Choshen the special names of Hashem for the Urim V'Tumim, Hayu Nodoim B'Masoras Mimenu L'Gedolei Chachma Yisrael. Maybe he then created an oral transmission for the great people of the time that they should know what he was writing on the parchment that he was putting inside. Shemasram lohem im sisrei Torah. The same way you could imagine sort of secrets of the Torah, very, very deep things that maybe most of us can't understand. You could imagine he conveyed them, whether it be conveyed them to Yoshua, elders, whatever it is, that these things he also conveyed just privately to some very unique people. Ulefichach haya biyad David ephod vaya kidmus ephod Moshe uvo choshen kidmus choshen hakodesh avol nirash hayubad kashenemar b'shmuel narach agur ephod bad. Okay, so he's just interested. There's a pasuk that talks about David HaMelech wearing an ephod, which is a priestly garment. So he says maybe the fact that David HaMelech wore that, it's because it was imparted to him exactly how it worked. He says it could also be that it was just a garment that wasn't a priestly type of garment. It was just, a similar model, so to say, but different material. But at any event, this point the Ramban makes that the way people used the Urim V'Tumim in the future must have been, or probably was, that Moshe Rabbeinu just imparted it orally to uniquely distinguished people, and they kind of went with that. Okay, if you remember, we also discussed yesterday this idea that the judgment of Bnei Yisrael is on the heart of the Kohen Gadol. What in the world did that mean? So Rashi explained that the judgment meant not God's judgment of Bnei Yisrael, but God's answers for what Bnei Yisrael should and shouldn't do, which is, of course, the famous thing about the Urim V'Tumim, that if they had a major question about what they should do or what battle they should fight, they could consult the Urim V'Tumim. So the answers from God were held on, or resided, so to say, with the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. It's just interesting. The Sforno says something else. If you look at the Sforno on Pasuk Lamed, Mishpat B'nei Yisrael Alibo, she is Spalel Aleim, she is Kuba Mishpat. It's very literal, that the judgment of Bnei Yisrael would be on his heart, that the Kohen Gadol should always daven that God should judge Bnei Yisrael favorably. It's an interesting pshat that's represented. But again, it's a fascinating thing to think about, that this breastplate that has the names of all the tribes of Israel on it, it's on his chest. It's a reminder that his emotions and thoughts should never stray far from the welfare of the Jewish people, and that's part of his role as being a Kohen Gadol. It's very interesting. It's interesting what you remember. I once heard a very well-respected congregational rabbi. It's like a rabbinic seminar, and I think he was given the topic of helping people deal with, challenging situations. And he said whatever wisdom he imparted, and it was all very worthwhile. Then at the end, he said, and I have to tell you all one more thing. You're these people's rabbi. It's your job to daven for them. You could, if they need to daven for themselves. I don't mean that the rabbi davens and everything is good, but he said it's not enough to give solace and practical advice and halachic decisions. they're counting on you for other stuff also. You need to daven for them. I was just very moved by the message of it. Of course, it's true. But so the Kohen Gadol needs to have Bnei Israel always on his mind, all of Bnei Israel on his mind. Okay. Verse 35. Talking about the Me'il, I think the Me'il could be translated as the robe. And it's interesting, there are these bells on the bottom of the robe of the Kohen. And in verse 35 it says, V'haya al Aaron l'shares, and it should be on Aaron that he should wear it when he's serving in the Mishkan. V'nishma kolo b'vo al hakodesh, and his voice will be heard when he comes to a sacred place, into the Mishkan, into the sacred area of the Mishkan, excuse me. Lifnei Hashem u'v'tzei so it's when he walks, the bells will ring. So his presence will be heard when he comes into the sacred area, when he goes out of the sacred area, v'lo yamus, and he won't die, which of course implies that if he comes in to serve without wearing this robe, he will die. This thing about that he should be heard is a very interesting thing to think about, why that's so important. If you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Lamed Hey, it's right around the middle of the Ramban. In mine, it's a new paragraph, Umasha Amar Lamala. Umasha Amar Lamala, V'nishma kolo b'vo al hakodesh v'lo yamus, hu al dati biur l'mitzvah sapamonim. Says the Ramban, this thing about that he'll be heard when he comes in, I think this is explaining why it's important there be bells on his garment. You know, the garments of the Kohen Gadol look fine without having bells on the bottom, right? And it's not. I mean, it's not like, gosh, what's a distinguished outfit without bells? You know, it doesn't seem to be an evident need. It should be that he's heard when he comes in. The kanes lefnei Adonov ki'ilu bershus, famous idea that when he comes to serve in the Mishkan, the fact that his arrival is announced by the sounds of his bells, it's like he's getting permission from God to serve in the Mishkan, like he's coming into God's house, and it's sort of the equivalent of knocking. In other words, that you don't just dart in, you kind of make your presence known. Could you imagine with a king of flesh and blood that someone just storms into the royal palace or storms into the king's private areas? I just felt like coming in. How you doing? You know, that would be shocking. Kinyan Achashverosh. The Ramban clearly knew we were getting close to Purim. This is the Ramban says this is like Achashverosh, right? The whole thing Esther says, I can't just go to talk to him. I've got to be invited. Okay, this is another point. Okay, skipping about 8 lines further. What's the idea of the stones of the breastplate? Let it be that when the Kohen Gadol comes in to serve on Yom Kippur, let God see his breastplate and the names of each tribe on his breastplate as a reminder that God should look with merit upon the tribes. Mishub B'Shem Reb Levi over here, Omer Mashal ben Malachim Shaya Padgog Nichnas Etzlo Malamid al Benos Sanegoria V'Misyari ben Aom de Malach Shema Yifgu Bo. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi gives an interesting mashal that imagine there was some kind of monarch, and someone came before him to try to speak on behalf of others. And the person who was speaking on behalf of others was afraid that the part of the royal retinue would would kind of push him out, would push back against him, would argue what he was saying. So what did he do? So basically what the monarch did is the monarch gave him some type of garment that would intimidate the rest of the entourage. And that when this person would come in to argue on behalf of others, there was some garment that he was wearing that would intimidate those who would normally interject and say, yes, but they're so flawed in this way and that way. Kach Aaron. So Aaron would come into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. This was the place of the angels. How could Aaron go and be with the angels? So the Medrash says that the special garments of the Kohen Gadol are to sort of intimidate the angels. That when Aaron wants to come, and this was tied into the idea of of the names of the tribes in the breastplate. When Aaron wants to come in and daven for the Jewish people, the angels should sort of move away, so to say. Interesting thing. But that first thing about the bells is a very, very famous idea. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this practice. There are some people that are very particular about it. Have you ever seen people who, even if they're walking into their own house, they knock on the door before they come in? Like even if they know no one's home, they knock on the door before they come in. So it's a takeoff on this thing with the Kohen Gadol. That the idea is that if a person, reflects on the fact that we believe that God is in our home also. So I never feel I'm walking in when no one is there. So then the derech eretz is just like the Kohen Gadol has his voice be heard, has his presence be heard when he comes in with the bells. So a person knocks on the door. That's where certainly not halacha. It's not halacha. I can't emphasize it enough. But some people are very into it. But that's the spirit of it. Okay. Let's go on to verse 36. The Asisa Tzitz Savtor. The Tzitz was also something special for the Kohen Gadol. It was this like plate worn across his forehead of pure gold. Fitachta love pituchei chosam kodesh lashem, and you etch into the tzitz, into that gold strip, the words "holy to God." Okay, verse 38. Vayam meitzach Aaron, it should be on Aaron's forehead. Aaron esavona kodashim she'ekdishu v'nei Yisrael chobat nos kadshem. And so this, through wearing this, Aaron bears the sins, brings atonement for the sins of the Jewish people if they do things wrong with their different holy gifts. And it should be on his forehead to act as a favor for them before God. So it's just interesting to think about what's so great about the words Kodesh Lashem, holy to God. It sounds nice, but why is that so essential? So we will start with that tomorrow, God willing. We discussed the Ramban a little bit more about the Urim V'Tumim. The Sforno shared another idea of what it means that the judgment of Bnei Israel is on his heart of the Kohen Gadol with the breastplate. And we discussed the Ramban regarding symbolism of the bells on the robe and the names on the stones of the breastplate.